Kia ora, I'm Ian Harvey, founder of Collective Intelligence, and this is Stuff That Matters Now. No mai, hoki mai, everyone. Today I am interviewing Rob Garratt, principal of the Garratt Motor Group, and our topic today is how do we sort out the decision of what car to buy in this day and age with all the energy issues and so forth we've got in front of us and the options. And before we started, I asked Rob how he would describe himself, and he thought himself as a nutcase automobile fanatic that services cars through to racing cars and everything in between. Rob, good afternoon and welcome to this conversation.
Thank you, Harv.
And Rob is the most knowledgeable person I know about cars, and the reason I wanted to interview Rob is because he doesn't sell them. He services a huge range of cars, and he's an absolute, I'd call you a perfectionist, Rob, would be fair?
Yes, yeah. It is probably a negative in some ways.
And as a customer, it's a positive.
Positive, exactly.
Yeah. Shout out to your wife, how she's put up with you all those years,
yes.
But that's not the subject of today's conversation. So, Rob, seriously, thank you for sitting down with me, and we've been pondering this for a wee while, and 2022, there is a huge amount of change going on, and so thank you. Rob, just let's give the listeners a background of how long you've been interested in combustion engines and automobiles and stuff.
Oh, well, it just goes right back, childhood really. Just had that inkling, that natural, which came from probably a couple of a grandfather's side there. So right through into high school, and then obviously leaving apprenticeship, and have not stepped away from it. So it's been a fair long time, and probably I've entered the trade on the December the 5th of 1979, and even for my generation, I've seen a dramatic shift. So I've sort of been fortunate to see we came in just as the tail end of that horrible sort of era, those lovely British cars that were built back in those days, to see the generation of Japanese really hitting the market, and obviously as everything else that has evolved over each decade, and now we're faced with the real evolvement of EV, hydrogen, synthetic fuel powered vehicles, which is obviously getting a push from all countries. All governments are pushing to try and alleviate some of the heating of the old stratosphere.
Yep.
And our combustion engines have no doubt added to that. So we reach a point at 2022 where there's certainly the manufacturers are now really getting in behind and pushing there. So we've got a bit to sort of discuss.
Rob, what's fascinating with you is that you've kept up to date. Right, so it's through all that period, and I'm not presuming this because I know this from your reputation, but you've kept up to date with all the technology, and I know that you've been heavily involved with Bosch.
Yes.
At board level, I think.
Yes, yeah. It ended up evolving into becoming part of the Asia board there for a few years, and obviously also working heavily with Bosch and through the workshop. On the technical front as well, which Yeah, it's just been one of those things. Whether it was my training, my service manager that said you'll never stop learning, which is a bit of a cliche, but at the time, and it's something that I've constantly pushed and read. You read, you look, you understand, and had just that desire a lot in the trade. Ones that did their time when I was doing my time, the amount of them that sort of have switched off to it and moved away purely because they didn't have that attitude of, it's always different, and especially if you're wanting to operate how we operate with a broad spectrum of, makes and models that we need to, and obviously my staff. Throughout, that's one thing we've always funded, lots of training, in-house and externally.
Because Rob, when you were in a CQ team, I remember facilitating your host day, and what struck me was that on your host day we talked to the general manager for Bosch New Zealand, I think, at the time.
Yes, correct.
And just talking about the sheer research and development they were putting into basically computers and electrics at that stage was phenomenal. And so that host day might have been maybe 8 years ago or something like that.
Yes.
And they were talking about that back then. I think the figure was something like 50% of the value of the car at that stage was in Bosch gear. With say if it was a certain scale car, it was just phenomenal the amount of electrics that was in the vehicle.
Yes, and
which is not where you've come from, is it?
No. So it's the interest and the desire to learn. You sort of broaden into the different fields of the automotive industry. So. And just as it involves, it's been evolving, so it's probably been the most dynamic and interesting facet of the motor vehicle, and obviously, as anyone in the trade would say, the most demanding part of the vehicle as well. It can really keep you up at nights, trying to resolve an issue. But, yeah.
And Rob, talking to me today, you know how poor my understanding of motor vehicles are.
Yes.
So you need to talk to me like a Labrador today. All right? Be nice and talk in nice, slow words so I understand. I'm intrigued, Rob, just before we get going, I'm intrigued. What car have you least enjoyed servicing over the years?
Hopefully I don't offend anyone. You just have to straight put it in that British bloody land crabs, those Morris 1300s.
Really?
That sort of thing. The Triumph 2.5s, that era. You look at the vehicles today and just the way things come apart, it's all beautiful. The British, if there's 6 bolts required to hang something on, the British would have had 26.
Right.
In the most unserviceable spot. And although, the engine bays are certainly crammed now, but I can just remember thinking, God, thank goodness I came in at the tail end of that. Although we're down there and we've got a Humber Super Snipe that's come in from England last week. That's sitting down in the workshop. So we still have to work on some of that older British stuff, but it's not the daily runner. So the Land Crab is certainly the one that brings back just haunting memories of, oh my God.
And what would be your favourite vehicle you've serviced?
The European cars, today you call them the supercars. Those ones, the Porsches, the Maseratis, the Ferraris that we do. They're technically challenging, and I've always enjoyed the challenge of a car that's a little bit more difficult, and the owners of them are probably a lot more enjoyable. Just the nature of the person who owns that type of vehicle, and perhaps they're a bit more keener to spend money too, perhaps.
Right. But they've bought those cars because they love the vehicles.
Yeah,
yep.
and they're willing to look after them to the correct level.
Yeah,
and it's just the challenge of understanding how they work and the little intricacies of making them
right the way through to people like me who forget to service a car, bring them in every 6 months to change the clock with daylight saving and things like that.
Yeah. You're just normal, Harv. You're normal.
Oh, I don't think I've been called that before. Okay, so Rob, before we start on looking at the different options now, let's get out on the table. What biases would you say you've got with these, looking at all these different sources, with whether it's diesel, petrol, synthetic, hydrogen? What biases have you got? So let's temper it with that.
Okay, which is a good thing to start with. Actually, I hadn't thought about it
because nobody's neutral, right?
Correct. Yeah. The probably the biggest thing that pisses me off, quite frankly, is that, and we'll talk about it as we go, especially with the EVs, that we look at the very end result. We have, for want of the sake of a Nissan Leaf sitting outside, and great, we plug in, we've got the power there. It's relatively, in today's market, cheap there, and we go whatever distance in it. And they go, it's green. But I look at all those very, very special lithium-ion, lithium-miles, all those special minerals there that we've had to extract out of some poor bugger's backyard somewhere in the world. And a lot of it is in country now that's locked up or has been locked up. And we might be pushing jungle over. And the energy that's gone in to refine those, to get those metals so we can produce these batteries, I sort of see it as, well, we're gaining here because this vehicle can, no emissions, we're not warming the climate, we're doing a good thing. But no one talks about what it took to get that battery in the state so it's in the vehicle. And I just sort of see the way it's sold, and we've been pushed. So I have a bit of a bias on that. But in saying it, I love how quick these EV vehicles, incredible, 0 to 100k. You're talking almost Formula One. Specs to
sewing machines
and that, incredible, and they really fascinate me on it. But I just look at what it's taken to get there, and it's a bit like our windmills that are all up on there. We've got windmills in the States, the very early generations, and they can't recycle them. There's nothing, so they're digging holes in the Nevada desert or something to bury them. And I just see sometimes that I look at the environment and go, we're sort of solving one thing, but creating almost more. Yep. So that's my bias on how we get to the end result. We've got this vehicle, and you could almost say it was probably in the horse and cart. We had a carbon neutral horse towing a cart, and then we turned up with this. We had to suck oil out of the ground and transport it around when the car, first turned up there as well.
Okay, so Rob, so we've got that bias out of the way. Right, that's got somewhere. And it's interesting because I know people like Mike Joy, who is an environmentalist, would agree with you. And he gets annoyed with people going, electric cars are not our saviour. It's the way we use cars is the problem, and they all have an impact. So, Rob, let's go back and let's look at a case study like me. So at the moment I drive a 2.2 litre diesel, coming up at a couple 100,000 K. I'm not selling it yet because I don't know what to replace it with, right?
Yes.
I travel about 40,000 K a year around the place. That's dropping back as I get more mindful about my driving. And in the past I would have, and I've always liked the Hyundais, and I would generally go back and buy a 2 litre diesel vehicle, right? And I have enjoyed those because they're economic to run, and the diesel engine's been, a wonderful vehicle. What process do I go through now to look at my options going forward? So how long are diesel vehicles like that going to be around?
Well, at the present, if you take what the manufacturers are talking, the diesel's definitely got the death cleaver over its head, as far as, because the highest sales of the diesel vehicles in the world are all now being generated into the cities. It's not the farmers, type thing out. It's all getting pushed. So there's only a limited amount of what we can do with catalytic converters and DPFs as far as cleaning them up out the tailpipe. And so the diesels are definitely going to be pushed into a corner. And I think that may be a world or just high density. And that's still the conversation to have. They're saying we want them out, but at what stage? Will the Toyota Hilux eventually become no diesel engine? Will it just be a battery powered one, or a petrol? Is it running on synthetic fuel or a hydrogen one? And that's still the conversation to be had out there. So for you, it's a real minefield because we're getting pushed that way, but it's not really meeting a lot of your needs. And you're sort of the EV, perhaps for the distances that you go, and you're not always going to a main centre, and the powering points and having the ability to put some charge into your vehicle. And then we've got the hydrogen coming along, and there's one station in Auckland for hydrogen, and obviously that's not going to help you in fielding when you want to fill up to head to Tamaranui for a business meeting or something.
Governor putting a fair bit of money though into hydrogen, not filling up, but going back to Mike Joy again, he's saying that hydrogen consumes a huge amount of electricity to produce.
Correct. Yes.
And he's going, electricity is not as clean to produce.
Exactly. Is it the coal-fired Huntley, or is it a gas-fired one from at New Plymouth, or is it out of the hydro or a wind farm?
Yep.
So it's all depending where that energy is. Although with the hydrogen, it's carbon neutral when it comes out the tailpipe. So you may have used carbon to produce it, but now it's when the vehicle's filled with it, it's carbon neutral there. So that's almost a win. But then how many vehicles are doing that to right the balance of that production of energy?
So Rob, disregarding, so let's just talk about hydrogen. So my diesel vehicle, given that in the cities they're going to be a no-no and most vehicles are used in cities, and so certainly we're getting signals from the European car makers that the combustion engine's on its way out. Is that correct?
Yeah, on their way out. But we could go back through and see in the 80s, we were predicting, and the manufacturers were saying we're going to be, that stage there was the natural gases and stuff. That's where we're all going to be. LPG,
yep.
and that's what they'll come from the factory in. So now the statement's made now, but as we've seen in history, that suddenly, what the scientists are working on, we don't know. There's still stuff that will be outstanding, that will come through this, what Bosch does, and Shell and all them. They're evolving other stuff that we aren't aware of.
So other energy sources?
I believe so. There's, you just look at where the cell phone's gone and how they've been able to make stuff. Well, a decade ago that wasn't even conceived, that how much capacity we could get in them, the batteries alone, what they could do there. So the future will change, but at the moment we've got really the only if you were changing today, your only option is EV, because that's the only thing that's getting produced out there, and whether that will work for what you need the vehicle to do. If you're in Remuera, Auckland, and you're just wanting to commute to the other side of the bridge and back each day, the EV vehicle is going to meet your needs for the immediate times. But if you're a farmer in Taihape, an EV vehicle isn't going to meet your needs. You're wanting more capacity. It's all the trials are done like Mobil One Oil. It used to be that ad on TV, 1 million Ks. You could do 1 million Ks on the one sump. Well, that 1 million K was done in a nice temperature, flat roads, and that. And we all know Taihape. She's straight up, straight down, and you can imagine how long an EV battery towing the horse float with the kids' horses in it is going to last. So at the moment, we've got the city, the urbanised person who's wanting their daily runner, the EV where it sits. Not talking about its price, the premium you have to pay for it, but if you're wanting to reduce your carbon footprint, that's your only option at the moment in the foreseeable future until the likes of the hydrogen and its infrastructure is sorted. I read an article last night in England. There's approximately, using round figures, 8,000 service stations, petroleum fuel service stations in England. If they want to get any threshold of getting public on their side, they need 80,000 points of charge. So in sites where it's easy access for customers to charge away from their house, they need 80,000 of those, and they've only been able to achieve 6,000 so far. Right. So
there's a lot of work still to do there. Right?
Lot of work still to do, but for some people,
Rob's just
swatted a fly,
swatted a mosquito.
Mosquito, it is a mosquito.
Yeah.
Bugger.
So Rob, So the hydrogen's not here yet on the horizon, and I know Hyundai are looking at that. So with that, just going back to the manufacturers, who do you see leading the field and changing over? So we know Tesla's doing a wonderful job at what they're doing, and I think only the second company in America to make the cars that aren't subsidised by the government.
Yeah,
I think the only profitable after Ford.
Yes,
so it's a hell of an achievement.
Yeah. And that's a good because there was a feed last night that this wonderful government that we have at the moment is looking to do a subsidy. If you got a 20-year-old and more car, that you'll get up to $15,000 as a subsidy, but your average battery EV vehicle is $15,000 to $20,000 dearer than than the average petrol vehicle out there. And we all know that subsidies don't really entice manufacturers to sort and make the vehicle come down so it is achievable for the masses. It's middle New Zealand, lower New Zealand, where all the, for want of a better word, gas guzzlers will sit, because it's the economics demographic. You know, the upper middle New Zealand and above will be able to go and buy whatever one, whenever they want and however many, and do it frequently or infrequently. That they've got all the choices. But our biggest sector that needs to be probably dealt with to make any impact on our emissions the financial hurdle is quite a major one for them, and we've all seen, well, farming, it never worked for them. It places a whole false economy around how well the manufacturers will keep thrusting forward. And
so what do you think the answer is, Rob? Because the thing is that, you know, if you go back to computers and where I'm really interested in seeing this movement is I went to a conference years ago and the computer guys were just taking the piss out of the car makers and saying, you know, how quickly computers were moving compared to manufacturing vehicles was moving, right? The pressure in the automobile sector, I don't think has ever been higher to actually reimagine and come up with new solutions.
Correct. Yeah, you've just seen it where, you take the last 5 years, how quickly the average modern vehicle, that's for each year of the last 5 years, the facets that have been brought to the car and to the almost standard, you know, for want of a better word, using a brand, your basic Toyota, you know, you've got lane changed avoidance, you've got that many airbags inside the vehicle. The pressure to have a safer vehicle has been huge in the last 5 years, and it's just, I've seen it's just wildfire. I've never seen so much movement that's gone on in the automotive industry. You'd almost, on everything else, you go, oh, that was that decade,
yep.
Or now it's just rampant. And whether it moves back to Bosch as well, because the technology, you know, we're seeing movement in the battery technology to get more life out of each single charge. And the manufacturers are relying on them, where Tesla's got a bit of they're developing the battery and obviously the vehicle. So they've got the complete package that they're guaranteeing to push. Have they made the others pick up and run with it? I could almost say that's probably a definite there. So having Tesla on the scene, I think, has accelerated, but the others need to really probably put more R&D into the Bosch and anyone else who's the Indian companies that are doing in-depth further battery technology.
Actually, just reminded me of an interview I had with Rod Oram a few months ago, who'd come back from the COP, whatever it was, I can't remember the COP conference over in the UK, and talking about listening to manufacturers of steel and different organisations. And he mentioned the cars, how they were all collaborating now, because basically saying we need to find a way of saving our industry.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That we've all got this problem. And he said they were all looking to, working out how to become carbon neutral and produce. And he said he'd never seen that before, where competitors were coming together and going, we've got to work this out together. Otherwise, our industry is just going to be taken out.
Yes.
Are you seeing that at all between the car manufacturers, Rob? Is that apparent?
Definitely. It's definitely evolving, and it's been evolving that for some years. You could definitely say there's the last decade, brands are interlinking with each other, and that's through production costs. Just not talking about battery powered, EVs or anything. Just the production to keep the value of the vehicle down. So there's a lot of common floor plans, and the Volkswagen Amarok and the Ford Ranger from next year are all going to be the same vehicle with a different badge on it.
Right.
So that's been, Mazda and Ford had that for, start of the 90s.
Yep.
There. So that's definitely happening. And I think, so like Toyota's a little bit more hybrid. So they're keeping the petrol engine with the battery cell pack there, and they're sort of holding that way how they're dealing with it. The others are a lot more collaborative because they're all wanting to go straight EV, because obviously there's more pressure. They probably look more at the city. For their cars, there's going to be more pressure come from local body government in the world's cities there, or the pressure from their clients that they can drive into the middle of Berlin. Like 2015 when I was there, I had to have the right sticker, otherwise the camera picked me up, and the rental company would have got a phone call if I wasn't the right vehicle to be going into the middle of Berlin to park up for a week. They would have tracked me down, told me get out. There was a fine, I can't remember what.
Right.
So these things will only be a lot more common throughout the world where our dense population is. And actually, there was one thing when I was doing the tour, biking the length of New Zealand on the Te Aroa trail, entering Auckland, biking through that lovely bike transit. You're right beside the motorway, and you're in a vehicle. You got your aircon on. You're on. Now you sit on a bike, and you chew the air. I was horrified. I did not realise. You just until you're amongst it, and biking along, obviously using plenty of oxygen. That was one thing that really brought it home to me, that this dense populated area, that you're not aware of what you're producing until you're out in it using your lungs.
Interesting.
There.
And Auckland's not a densely populated city?
No. Sparsely when you compare it to Mumbai or
other cities.
Yeah.
Rob, I heard the boss of Formula One saying that they want to move to hydrogen vehicles to do their racing because they want to keep the big engine, the 1,000cc engine, and they want to keep the noise.
Yes.
Right? And they don't want to race electric because they'll be too heavy for the 1,000cc and so forth. And obviously they could race them in a smaller engine and so forth, but they just put a stake in the ground and said that's what we want to do. Yeah. I thought that was a really interesting comment to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yes, if old Clarkson, the quiet motor vehicle is more dangerous than a vehicle that's making a noise that's coming towards you. The Formula One have really helped the rest of the manufacturers evolve. As they've stepped through. And for my time in the automotive industry, you just see where each decade where Formula One has evolved to, and it's well documented that you see that technology coming to fruition on the everyday vehicle out there, and it is a lot of people love the engine, and it's still a great thing. Like, if you had have said in 1985 when they were saying the V8 Holden will be gone by another decade, and you just look to see where it's all still being produced. It's the Otto cycle engine can still be there, and I think it will be. The cycle, the principles of the engine, it's just getting it to run on something that's going to be usable as far as getting the resource to whatever you're going to add into that engine. And it's compact. You take the vehicle today, a combustion engine, the manufacturers have got it bumper to bumper that is 100% recyclable, and for want of a better word, easily recyclable. We have it all, the processes down to recycle that car 100%. We've got these lovely batteries where costs of trying to break them down is prohibitive at the moment. So that's another thing that has to be
added into the equation.
Yep. But yeah, I can see Formula One well and truly. If they want to go in a direction, the manufacturers announced at the Miami Formula One on Sunday. There, Porsche, Audi, so that's the Volkswagen group, going to be entering 2026 into Formula One. So they are going to bring a whole new facet of technology that where they see it, and I think that's where the springboard will be. They because of their Porsche has so much in-depth history, Alpha, they're coming from way back, and they're intertwined with so much with the motorsport. They've got all these lovely vehicles, and they still want, if Harv wants to buy a 74 911, they want Harv to be able to buy some fuel that can run on. And that's a Otto cycle engine. So they're heavily still going down the synthetic, but the synthetic fuel that will be able to be, with some minor adjustments, to be able to put into your old classic 911. So these manufacturers are spending billions on that for one facet, to keep the history going, the evolution. And they will take what they find in getting this perfected, so it can be done and shipped around the world. They will stumble across something they'll take it into their Formula One program, and that hydrogen is there. Slot car racing's all pretty cool, but and we've got the E formula that's on a circuit now throughout the world. It's all good, but we need that noise. It's part of the circus, isn't it?
It is. It is. Even to me. Even at the horse racing, if you didn't allow a jockey to make any noise, it's part of that, and we sort of, I think their business would demise very quickly if Formula One was just quiet. So, Rob, what you're saying is what you're describing is the passion for the combustion engine is so great that people are going to find a way to power it cleanly.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying. And that engine is naturally going to be
I've
small.
never heard that before. There you go. I've never heard. I've never thought about that, because I don't have that passion, right?
Correct, yes.
I don't have that passion, but millions and millions of people do. Maybe even, Okay, so I hadn't thought of that. And so that's a whole different gig. Rob, have you had a look at the Teslas at all?
Yes. I've got a very good mate who's got one of those, the gull wing one, driven it myself a couple of times there. marvellous, horrendously expensive for what it is,
yeah.
And that, but that's got to be 3 years old now. So obviously, the technology 3 years ago was at its forefront, so it set quite a high premium. So what with Tesla? What as in?
No, because the thing that really interests me, Rob, I've been for driving one of those, haven't driven one, but it was the fact that he has brought in a whole different. There's a lot of space in them. The seats are narrow. There was lots of different changes in the car, not just the power source. There were lots of different changes in it.
But I must admit, the one thing that annoyed the hell out of me was two things. So when I drove it, I had just finished reading an article a week prior to it on the guy who brought one in damaged from America, repaired it, and needed it to be, it's just recoded, for want of a better word. So it just needed to be plugged into the internet. Someone sitting in America goes, that's okay, sits there, punches a few keys, and it livens up. Well, Tesla decided that this guy in New Plymouth, no, we don't want that vehicle going again. So, and through my experience with my mate down south, had a terrible time initially. Tesla, he flew to America before he got some sense out of them because it wasn't doing the distance.
Right.
But that's a whole nother story and shouldn't cloud anyone's, because all of those issues have been sorted by Tesla now. But when down in Florida last year, when that big, huge hurricane was coming in, Tesla dialed in to all their Florida owners and gave them further distance. And it's like, golly gosh, imagine that say I had the ability, Harv, to control your vehicle in that way. And it's like that part of it, it's almost Big Brother is becoming part of our automotive scene. And, hey, you could say, hey, that's quite good. If Harv's ripping along the desert road and he's going 140 k's when he should be doing 100, Mr. Tesla might wind his car down for him. You can say, well, that's a good aspect of it. But, it's sort of, you never thought your car would ever be something that could be, it was your bastion, your car, it's your pride and joy, and now someone else on the other side of the world could just stop it. And for what, it doesn't matter if you've paid $200,000 or $20,000 for it, someone's got the ability to control it. And it's like this whole world we're in,
I think we might have uncovered another bias, Rob.
Yeah. It's probably one that's...
It's called autonomy.
Yeah.
Rob, what about the likes of the autonomous car? How does that sit with you?
Yeah. Well, God, I'd love one. How often has Deb said to me, well, I'm not coming down to pick you up from the club tonight? So you got to
obviously too many times.
Yeah. So is there one of my mates, one of their wives come and take me home if I know I shouldn't be driving, which responsible citizen. So if I had my vehicle parked there and I just stagger out the back door of the club and go, right, take me home, what a wonderful thing. But I sit there and I drive down the road and I think often about, God, a vehicle coming towards me that's the person's in it doesn't have any control over it. Are the road markers that the autonomous vehicle is picking lines up? Is the markings in the road good enough for it to still pick it up? How they're functioning? Has the road been altered slightly and the software's not been updated, and it's going to cross the medium line and have a head on with you? It's certainly. I don't know if the generations that are coming on now can deal with that a lot easier, but To me, bar getting me home from the club, I sort of see it as something that would be quite
disarming, wouldn't it?
Yeah. You're sort of just getting in and someone's taking you away, but there's no one in the driver's seat type thing. It would be really, how quickly you would come to terms with that. Whether it's a thing that only these ones that are getting born now will be quite happy because that's the way they see the world, and they haven't come from where we've come from, and we have it so ingrained in our subconscious about how things should be. Yeah. Really, isn't it? It's the old...
and look, it's interesting. I would love an autonomous vehicle because I'd hop on it and I'd just read and, there are times I think, my concentration when driving isn't great, and, I often think I'd be safer in an autonomous vehicle because my mind's all over the place. And I wonder if... whether I would be safer in that. But, it's an interesting thing because we've got used to going back to Tesla and so forth, dialing into people's vehicles. We've got used to our computers being updated while we're asleep and all that sort of carry on.
Yes.
And we take that, I take it for granted now and expect the latest software and so forth to be put on it.
Correct.
And for cars to have that same update while we're asleep, is how do I feel about that? I'm okay with that personally.
Yeah.
But I don't have the relationship with a vehicle that you do, Rob. Right? So when you talk about the noise of a car and all that's in racing, I couldn't give a fuck. Yeah. Seriously, I get it. I've never been to a motor race in my life, and car racing interests me for about 30 seconds watching Formula One. I go, that's interesting, and somebody crashes or whatever. Oh, that's cool, but that's it. And so I don't have that relationship that you do, but lots and lots of people do, don't they?
Yes, yeah. Well, they say it's all about being with the right woman, don't they?
Okay.
To enjoy it.
Okay. So we're deviating slightly.
Seriously.
We're talking about Deb now, your wife, not mine. Okay, all right. Good thing is Deb won't listen to this. Oh, no, she most probably will. So hello, Deb. Lovely that you've entered in this conversation. So, Rob, going back to the decision-making now of changing a vehicle, what are the steps people need to take? What are the steps people need to take when they're looking at option A, B, C, D?
Yeah. Firstly, the first thing is to do what are you going to want from that vehicle? Is it that you go to Massey University 5 times a week, but you're quite happy because you've got another car sitting in that you'll jump in and go to Tauranga, but 80% of your driving for that year and the gases that you're putting out, your little EV will suffice that and will be economical. The running service costs obviously are substantially less. The EVs, they produced a certain tyre, but the manufacturers have got around that now. So that's your first consideration. What are you going to use it for? Because it's no use buying something that won't and will never do what you want it to do. It's no use. Say they do put this $15,000 and you go and trade in. It's no use buying this EV and park it in the garage and hardly using it. What was the point? You've used something that all those valuable metals that are in the batteries. You've got to be changing for the right reason. As far as how your expectation, that's where if you're wanting to go to Taupo, from Fielding to Massey's one sector, what you call sort of just your general commute is one thing. But if you're wanting to be going to Taupo, towing something up there, then you've got to say, well, is the value of the correct vehicle, that's an EV, that with the ability to do what I want it to do, is it affordable? You've got to say, well, the amount of money that you're outlaying, and why spend $100,000 when a petrol powered vehicle at $55,000, that's quite fuel efficient. And you've got all that money to save. That you're how much you might say, well, if fuel stays at $3 a litre, that's a huge amount of fuel that you'll be using, and the life expectancy is still something that's a little bit not quite really bolted down from the manufacturers.
That's with the EV car?
Yep. For me, we're looking at the early Prius and everything, and they were quietly taken off the road as they all failed, and the life expectancy there wasn't really for what you spent to what you got, where things are rapidly changing. They're talking about the battery cell will just be a lease. So if it fails, you take it in, they'll swap it out there to take that issue away. But it's purely being on the greenie is one thing, but the practicalities of it is another. So it's all you pretty much put it in the box. What am I wanting to achieve from it? Will an EV do it? And if an EV will do it, it will do it. And going forward, there's still all these questions with your battery life, etc. Everyone's agreeing it's 2%. Every year the batteries get 2% less, just like our phones, and how that has evolved as the more EVs are used in New Zealand's climate. New Zealand's climate's different to Australia, and that's what all the manufacturers and the scientists still have to fathom out. And the old one's going to catch fire. And hopefully, we've had, unfortunately, there has been deaths through these batteries catching fire, and that some of that has been servicing, that they haven't been getting the service because people think you're just going to buy one and do nothing. There is quite a bit of servicing to do on them to keep them safe on one handle, and they still have a 12-volt battery. Your main ABS. All the main things are going to be run on your little black battery. Yep. The big lithium-ion ones are going to be driving your electric motors there. So you've got to look at it. Does it suit? And for yourself at the moment, you look at it and you go, no. From my perspective, looking in through Harvard's eyes, that. No, there's no EV at the moment that suits the type of vehicle I want and what I want it to do. So you either make a decision and go, right, I'll get something that's very fuel efficient, that's going to do me for another, say, 5 years, or you hold stage and see what evolves in the next 2 years. And we all thought hydrogen might have been the secret weapon, but that's got some drawbacks there. But the manufacturers they're working tirelessly on the evolving, and like we've sort of talked about.
And I think, Rob, that's the thing that I'm mindful of across a whole lot of other stuff, as well as apart from cars. And that is consumerism. So I'm trying to cut down crap I don't need. And so at the moment with this vehicle, I am going to try and keep that running for another maybe 4 years, and with your help. and look at what is emerging in the next 4 years. I am keen on the hydrogen and looking at seeing what that, knowing it's not the cleanest vehicle, but I think that's something in the relationship with vehicles that Kate and I are trying to get more mindful about sharing vehicles and little things like that.
Correct.
Which make a huge difference.
Yes.
And it was. This is an aside. This consumerism, because this is something we can have an impact on. So for me, it's changing my use and slowing down until I'm clearer what's coming through. And I like the idea of an EV, but it's not going to at this stage. I can't afford to buy what I would like to do that, and I tow a trailer a lot, and that's not going to happen, right? So, just recently, I was at a charity golf event, and at the end of the day, they gave out lots and lots of prizes to people for lots of different things. Most of it was rubbish, and it was interesting just seeing people delighted to get. I remember people were given 2 caps, right? They already had a cap that day and they're given 2 more. And I'm going, you don't need 2 more caps. And we won a prize that day, and we actually did really well in the tournament. We were one of the first up there. And I looked at the prizes, and you could select whatever you wanted. And we were allowed to select 3 things, and I selected a bottle of wine because I thought, okay, I can recycle that.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And I looked at the other stuff and I thought, I don't need that. I don't really need the bottle of wine either, but I quite like wine.
Right.
But I thought, I don't need that stuff. And I thought, we need to start thinking more about just what we are consuming that we don't need to. And so that, and at the moment, I think a lot of people with the car situations, they want somebody else to solve their problem. Where the problem, I think, lies with us and being more conscious about what we do with them.
Correct, yes.
And working from home.
Yeah, well, that must have surely
make
impacted.
A difference. Yep.
Yeah.
Working from home and all of those little things, I think, could, rather than, it's very easy to go look at people and go, save us with hydrogen or electric vehicles and so forth. And I think that's passing the responsibility to somebody else.
Yeah. And it's every morning I come into work, and obviously living at Mount Biggs, there's a big Air Force base out beyond past me, so I'm passing, and with what are we're $3, aren't we? $3 approximately for some petrol. They're all still one up. There'll be God knows how many coming from all around the region heading out there. They're all one up, and you think, God, it wouldn't be too hard to have a pretty big impact if suddenly they had 2 up, halved the amount of people transiting in and out.
And isn't that interesting, Rob? Because at the Air Force they are all well paid, but they're not. I'd imagine, I don't know this, they were well paid, but not at the top of the pay bracket. But the price of fuel hasn't made any difference to their changing their patterns.
Patterns, yes, yeah. So there's all these things. But infrastructure, God, if you look at Auckland, and as we know, everyone knows the battles that have, under-resourced, under-thought about getting infrastructure. That city could be a whole lot better, and probably been far better for educating the rest of New Zealand if we had a decent train system put in, a decent bus system, all that, and not making everyone go to the centre of Auckland for work. I think they've only just figured that out, haven't they?
It's changing. It's changing.
There, and that could have been a good teaching, but we've failed on that, and
Yeah, so look, it's an interesting thing, Rob, because it's the silver bullet, somebody else solving our problems. We've always enjoyed that.
Yes, yeah, bit of a Kiwi thing that.
Yeah,
But,
well, I think it's a worldwide thing, but yeah. So, Rob, what else? What drives you to get up? You know, you talked about coming to work. What's driven you all these years to get up and come to work and service cars? What's the passion? What's that about?
The passion. To solve what problems that perhaps a lot of other people can't. That's sort of been a driver, and it's what I enjoy. You know, it's been great for my mind. You know, I've probably school was school, but of being in the industry I'm in, of very much more educated. I've done things that my teachers wouldn't have thought I would have ever achieved. As far as so, it's driven me to better myself, and through that process means that I've enjoyed the challenge of working and working with other people. You know, I really enjoy. I've trained God knows how many apprentices, but I enjoy working with people to solve the customer's problems, and plus it's I've been able to enjoy a few things from that. Getting up in the morning has always been a pleasurable, even though there might be a daunting problem that we haven't been able to solve the day before. It's always been that urge to get up and go and carry on where others have perhaps decided they needed to do something else.
Rob, anything we've missed today that you'd want to add into this conversation?
Oh. Well, it's just the world. You know, we've just taken a little one sector of the emissions that we poke out. It's just with what's going on in the Ukraine and that. You know, we've always, Kiwis were pretty good at looking at the world and that, but it's like, God, we've as individuals, I think we've got to make a bigger statement. You know, that just taking that Ukraine where that is totally unacceptable to me. And hey, I was knee high to a grasshopper when Vietnam was on, and perhaps to that generation that Vietnam was totally unacceptable to them. This Ukraine thing is totally unacceptable, and we've got all these things going on in the world, and perhaps we're too passive, and perhaps and things that have gone on in New Zealand in the last 2 years that I just see all these things, like the automotive, our gang issues here in New Zealand. Just we perhaps as individuals need to be a bit more boisterous and make our feelings be known, to push whatever it may be. And hey, sometimes we don't like the Greens for hugging trees, but shit, they did some good things, after
absolutely.
Biking through the Porori forest up in the central North Island and seeing where those protesters, and I had no knowledge of this until I started that event to bike the length of New Zealand, that I got to see the tree, that huge big native there where they were all up it, chained themselves, and you see what was decimated and what was left all those years, so through those 80s, and it was like, shit, I used to think those tree huggers were bloody, what a bunch of useless pricks. And I looked at it and I was like, and it was there in black and white. On the right-hand side of me was decimation, what we stuffed up, and now was finally, and it was only like 2 metres, finally the regeneration is happening there. But on the left-hand side was what was not touched. And
through activism,
and there's good activism, and obviously stuff where the far right go.
Look, it's interesting, Rob. Activism. Sometimes we agree with it, sometimes we don't.
Oh yeah. Everyone has their point of view, but I just feel as if we've all sat there and done our thing. But I think as individuals, and it's really just pushed me, and this Ukraine thing's really pushed it to me.
I can see that.
We really need to make our get out there and make our point. And whether it's going to Anzac, that sets a precedent. More people that goes to it, the more that understand and about what those wars were about, and how this Ukraine thing is so pointless. And whether it's on the green front there, it's whatever floats your boat. But we need to be a lot more boisterous, us Kiwis and the rest of the world, to make the politicians, that make some absurd decisions, and to get them to push along on the right things. We shouldn't have our medical systems, where they are. They should be a lot better than where they are, and it's purely because we all go along and, we're all we'll line up, we'll wait and defer. And in some cases, we've all had close family members or close friends that if the health system had been a lot better, they could have got the correct treatment earlier, and they've, gone at an earlier age than what they should have. And that's just the same with this EV. We need them to push it along. The EV's good where it fits, but if we keep pushing, if we keep audibly pushing the politicians, the manufacturers, in decades' time they might have cracked it with hydrogen. There might be something else, but I think we need to be a lot more boisterous. And hey, I do find, even in the young apprentices now are a lot more outspoken. I wouldn't have said any of what they will say. So perhaps the generation thing will help push it. But that's my thing at the moment.
I can see that being
that we need to
being more boisterous and a bit more activism on stuff you believe in.
Correct. Yeah.
Didn't think we'd finish on that.
No.
Right, there we go. Do you feel better now?
Oh, definitely.
Rob, look, thank you for this. I have been a long admirer of your work, and it is totally foreign to me, but I do love your passion and your professionalism and the way that you've kept up with all this technological change and stayed relevant through this. And and good luck with the next few years as we emerge.
Yes,
it's going to be fascinating few years, and there's nothing like pressure to bring about change. And there's certainly plenty about pressure. Yeah. So Rob Garratt, thank you very much for this interview. And so I've now learnt I'm just going to wait for a bit longer until the decision making is clearer.
Clearer, exactly. Great. Thanks for the opportunity, Harv.
Thanks for listening in. We're Collective Intelligence, a one-of-a-kind people ecosystem that takes inspiration from Mother Nature. To find out how we reimagine leadership development, visit our website www.collectiveintelligence.co.nz.